Welcome back guys. In the last two videos we talked about the Arks of Omen campaign, Abaddon and Angron. If you haven't watched those, I suggest you watch them first. Today we'll be talking about the third part, the Siege of the Dark Angels Fortress-Monastery, the Rock. So let's do this. After Angron's destruction of Crusade Fleet Quartus, Vashtorr sought to launch his own assault on the Rock, the mobile fortress-monastery of the Dark Angels, and one of the most formidable fortresses in the Imperium. Seeing another key fragment, he did not seek to undertake such a momentous task alone, using his ties with Abaddon to mobilize several Bale fleets and Chaos Space Marine forces from the Black Legion under Zorvas. Iron warriors provided by Vashtorr's sometimes ally Bertrabo, and ward bearers alongside his own cultist and demonic host known as the Cult of the Archfane. Vashtorr himself rode at the head of the Ark of Omen, Aurak Unleashed. Using his Ark's infernal artificial intelligence known as the Aurak Myriad, Vashtorr was able to locate the Rock and its escort fleet, and developed a plan to ambush the Dark Angels and planned to use a diabolical warp weapon known as the Unmaker to bombard the Fortress-Monastery Void Shield array known as the Gorgon's Aegis into submission. The world of Marwen's Reach had recently cancelled its ties to the Imperium due to their need to defend themselves from a sudden Chaos Knight invasion. Unlike their distress call, this drew swift attention from the Imperium, and Fleet Primus's Task Force 12 and the Ultramarines Chief Librarian Varutigorius was dispatched to relieve the beleaguered world and restore its tribute payments. After learning the hated arch enemy, House Korvax, was assailing Marwen's Reach, House Raven proved eager to aid Tigorius in his task. The dark-hooded heretic Astartes, who were marching alongside the Chaos Knights, also drew the attention of the Dark Angels. Thus did the strike cruiser Implacable Justice appear in the Valvaya system with a complement of Raven Wing under Samael. After confirming the presence of the Fallen, the Rock itself and its escort fleet, carrying over half the chapter strength, appeared in the system. Vashtorr's assault came as the Dark Angels' home fleet was rushing to the aid of Marwen's Reach, having his own fleet materialize out of the warp at ambush angles, unleashing a punishing void salvo on the Dark Angels' fleet. Reacting quickly, Chief Librarian Ezekiel transferred fleet command to Samael and attempted to make full course towards Marwen's Reach in order to link up with Task Force 12, as Samael dispersed his own ships to initiate a fighting retreat. The Dark Angels fleet, however, suffered heavy losses, losing the warships the Revenged, Silent Sentinel, Primax Roar, Obsidian Sword, and Violent Ire. Meanwhile, the damaged frigate Solemn Vow suffered a Gela field failure and was overrun by demons. The Dark Angels did not suffer alone, however, and a squad of Deathwing Knights was able to board the traitor Grand Cruiser Vanderbraxes, taking control of its guns to destroy the vessel itself. The Implacable Justice, meanwhile, unleashed waves of Raving Wing Black Knights piloting fighter craft to cripple several traitor vessels. The Rock and its fleet escorts managed to cripple a quarter of the traitor host, but ultimately failed to prevent the Dark Angels' home from being boarded. With the Dark Angels' fleet dispersed, the Rock now faced the Aurak Unleashed alone. Utilizing gigantic energy projectors mounted on his Bale fleet escorts, Vashtorr charged the Unmaker aboard the Aurak Unleashed. The cannon aboard the Ark combined with the other energy projectors, unleashing a massive black of warp energy that disabled the Rock's void shield array known as the Gorgon's Aegis. The Archfane next launched a series of landing craft and boarding torpedoes, and the Rock itself was soon boarded, as the Dark Angels Master of the Forge sought to restore the Gorgon's Aegis. Aboard the Rock itself, Supreme Grand Master Azrael appointed Belial as overall commander of the Rock's defense, while Ezekiel, Lazarus, Asmodai, and Azrael himself led detachments to turn every corridor of the Rock into a killing field. Despite the scale of the assault, the Archfane knew he was unlikely to fully capture the Rock or wipe out the Dark Angels. This was not his goal, however. He simply sought to drive the Dark Angels back as he ventured deep within the walls of the Rock to acquire the prize he sought. The fight for the rock broke into two distinct theaters. The first was upon the rocky plain surrounding the rock's central command spire known as the Tower of Angels. Here, Iron Warriors and Black Legion armor alongside hordes of demon engines drove on the surface of the rock, threatening Belial's own stratagem and emergency void shield generators. Belial ordered armored spearheads venture out and push back the traitor armor alongside a cadre of librarians and Raven Wing land speeders. However, it soon became apparent that the traitors were content to tie up the Dark Angels and force Belial forces in place. The second and most important theater was deep within the rock itself, as the Archfane and his boarding parties sought to claim their prize. Here, fast-moving elements of the Dark Angels' 8th and 10th companies launched localized counterattacks against each fresh breach point. Meanwhile, layered defenses drawn from the remaining forces secured crucial intersections, corridors, lifts, and other facilities. The initial fighting was a confused race to staunch one wound after another as the full weight of the Chaos surprise attack came to bear. However, in the face of the overwhelming Chaos assaults led by Black Legion Terminators and Ward Bearers summoned demons, these Dark Angels detachments suffered grievous losses, but their sacrifice allowed time for a second layer of Dark Angels defenses to be erected, most notably in the Vault of Banners under Chaplain Asmodai. Here, Asmodai led 50 battle brothers and broke 4 successive Chaos assaults. In the Whispering Dome, Dark Angels, Dreadnoughts, and heavy weapons specialists fought a ferocious battle against the Iron Warriors' Warsmith Chorag. While the Dark Angels scored some local victories, it became apparent that the main thrust towards the Forbidden Gate and Ascension Well stairway led by Vashtorr himself could not be halted. Vashtorr was aided by Zophis and the Ward Bearer's Dark Apostle Gar-Hathan in summoning great demonic hordes and converging to dive deep into the heart of the rock. Acting swiftly, Lazarus deployed holding forces through great chambers of the region known as the Galleria Abscondale, while Azrael raced to bring elite reinforcements. Soon enough, Azrael and the Inner Circle emerged with his forces at the south wall of the Galerium Exacta in the Expanse before the Nameless Gate. Fighting through both demons and Black Legionnaires, Azrael declared, "No foe would cross the Nameless Gate." During the fierce fighting that followed, Azrael slew Zophis. With their leader dead, the remaining Chaos Space Marines fell back as demons covered their retreat. However, it was then that Vashtorr and his own forces arrived, and the Archfane met Azrael himself in battle, as Ezekiel held off hordes of demons and Lazarus held the gate itself. The battle before the Nameless Gate exploded in savagery as Vashtorr hacked into the Loyalist Vox, forcing many Dark Angels to remove their helmets or be driven mad. As the Archfane and Azrael traded blows, it became clear the Dark Angel could not win the fight despite his own prowess. It was then, however, that something distracted Vashtorr enough for Azrael to wound the demon and retreat back into his own lines. Meanwhile, in the void, the rock drew closer to Marwyn's reach as Belial left the stratagem in the Tower of Angels to take to the field himself alongside a retinue of Deathwing Knights. It was then that the destruction Vashtorr had felt made itself known. All the lights aboard the rock went out, and the shadows began to dance. The Fallen, alongside new warbands of Ward Bearers and Alpha Legion, emerged from these shadows. Marching forward at the head of the new unexpected host, Chaos Knights of House Corvax manifested outside the Tower of Angels, assailing Loyalist and Traitor armor both. At the head of this host was Be'lakor, the Dark Master and the hated foe of Vashtorr. Utter bedlam erupted throughout the Galerium Exacta as the battle turned into a three-sided bloodbath. Fortunately for the Imperials, the interruption allowed the Dark Angels to consolidate their positions and regain strategic momentum. Amidst the chaos, Vashtorr and Be'lakor began a fearsome duel. Ultimately, by draining the power of nearby machinery and void shields, Vashtorr was able to summon enough energy to overcome Be'lakor's shadows. However, the Dark Master still smiled a mocking grin and chided the Archfane for his hubris. Be'lakor stated that none of Vashtorr's mattered now, for they were all about to be undone. To that they need only to look out into space and see that Task Force 12 had finally arrived arrived to aid the Rock. It was then revealed that Be'lakor had engineered the invasion of Marwyn's Reach in the first place. As Tigurius' fleet closed in, Knights of House Raven were landed on the Rock and did battle with the Chaos counterparts of House Kovacs. Raven Princeps Grivan was able to personally slay a traitor Knight Tyrant. At the same time, Ultramarines and Nova Marines arrived and launched an offensive onto the Rock's service, as Tigurius himself laid the main assault against Black Legionnaires embroiled against Dark Angel's armor. By this time, Samael had managed to turn the Void War around in space and joined with Tigurius' own fleet. Be'lakor cared little, however, for he had never intended to best any side in the war for the Rock, but only to ruin Vashtor's plans. Furious, Vashtorr summoned a great strength to himself and took control of many nearby gun batteries, unleashing a barrage that toppled many war engines, warriors, and badly wounded Be'lakor himself. As Be'lakor vanished into the warp, he did so with a howl of rage. As the Dark Master vanished, so did his disciples. It was now that the Dark Angels and Crusade reinforcements brought their full fury against Vashtor's surviving forces. On the surface, Vashtorr knew all was lost, and he raged at his ruined plans. He promptly commanded his surviving warships to converge on the Rock and extract his remaining forces. Precious few traitors were rescued, and the Archfane himself teleported back aboard the Aurak Unleashed and exited from the war zone. In the aftermath of the battle, abandoned Chaos Space Marines were taken prisoner to the torments of the Dark Angels. In the aftermath of the battle, Azrael greeted Tigurius and Grivan coldly and ordered the Imperials withdraw away from the Rock and the Dark Angels' fleet. Used to dealing with the unforgiven, Tigurius obeyed, and the Rock and its escort re-entered the warp. However, for the Dark Angels, this matter was far from over. Meanwhile, interrogations of captive Chaos Space Marines under Asmodai revealed that Vashtorr intended to flee to the Somnium Stars. In truth, this was part of a new plan being devised by the Archfane. Alright guys, that's it for now about the Arks of Omen campaign. But it's not over yet. With the return of the Lion, we're probably going to see the Dark Angels under his command hunt Vashtorr or maybe Angron. We'll see. For now, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to stay tuned.